I couldn't leave her. You know me, I'm a believer. You know me, I couldn't leave her if I tried. If I tried, Lord, Lord knows I've tried. Lord knows I've tried. Ain't no thief gonna take my gold. Ain't no priest gonna save my soul. Ain't no thief gonna take my gold. Ain't no priest gonna save my soul. My soul. My poor soul. My soul. My soul.
So it is January 22nd, 2018. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history. A tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast on the Gwe, that's CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us on our audio always 24 hours a day. You can find audio streaming. You can also find us live here on Monday nights and Friday nights from 9 to 10 at www.ltnradionet.com. That's where you can always find the audio. And, of course, when we are live, we put it up on Facebook. So we're Facebook Live. So we are Facebook Live now. We are streaming. And after the show, that video will stay up there. So you can look at it and check it out anytime. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud, who is manning our board and the cameras. Not only the camera for our Facebook live stream, but the camera that will record our video for our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage you to subscribe to our channel so you can get notifications and updates for any videos that we post, not just the shows, but whatever else we do. My studio engineer is Kelly McMillan. I want to give her props for our setup here and for giving us technical assistance when we need it. Hey, the opening song was Logan Stats, and I've got to give Logan Stats some props. He's getting a lot of attention, so I'm going to give him a little bit more from our side. He won a competition on CTV, I think it is, called The Launch, which is another one of these talent contests. And by winning the first episode of Launch, he basically gets a record contract. He recorded a song as a part of that show called I Am the Lucky One, which was number one on iTunes in Canada. And I want to give my congrats to Logan Stats, but I also want to play some of his tunes. I've been playing his song for, well over, actually, for 2 years. Met Logan at the Native American Music Awards, not this past one, but the one before that. Picked up some CDs from him, and I've been playing his CD, Goodbye Goldia, since. And, of course, we opened up with Simple Man, and we'll play a few more Logan Stats tunes as we go through the show. Look, I want to thank you for joining us here and for checking out the show. I do have some interesting things to talk about, but primarily I want to open up. When I did the promo for the show, I put a picture of some of the folks in Hawaii. Now, last week was actually, I think, the 17th, so I think it was Wednesday. It was the 125th anniversary, and I've talked about this, of the U.S. overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, an absolute illegal act that would be followed by what is now 125 years of illegal occupation of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Now, you may not be aware of the Kingdom of Hawaii, but before the United States, essentially, with Americans who were living there for a number of years. In fact, even an American who was born there, a guy by the name of, a name that might be familiar to you when you think about things like bananas and pineapples, but a guy by the name of Dole, Sanford Dole, was actually born there. American parents from New England, and he would be a part of the coup of white men that would use the U.S. military in 1893 to allegedly overthrow, and then ultimately with the threat of the U.S. Marines and one of their ships that was in port would hold Queen Liliuokalani prisoner, hostage, and ultimately would claim that the Kingdom of Hawaii was no more, and that it was now the Republic of Hawaii or the Hawaiian Republic, and they were the government. It would take a number of years before the United States would officially recognize that. In fact, through some of it, the United States rejected it. In fact, this Republic of Hawaii would try to write up an annexation treaty and submit it to the president, the new president at the time, who was coming in March of 1893, Grover Cleveland. Cleveland looked at the conditions of what was happening with the reports that were going on. He actually sent somebody out to do an investigation and flat out rejected this notion that this coup of white men could overthrow the Hawaiian kingdom and then claim to be the legitimate power to offer or to ask for annexation to the United States. So he rejected it outright. So there was never an annexation treaty. There was never a treaty between the people of Hawaii, not even the Republic of Hawaii, because the president at the time wouldn't recognize them, at least initially. So that's kind of the history that ultimately at the dawn of the Spanish-American War, I think around 1898, the United States would move to claim to annex Hawaii without an annexation treaty and without using the constitutional provisions that the U.S. constitutional provisions for annexation, which would require a country or a people to request annexation, negotiate an annexation treaty. The president would have to accept that annexation treaty and then submit it to the Senate, not to the Congress, but as a whole, but the Senate, and get a 2/3 majority of the Senate to ratify that treaty. None of that happened. In 1898, by then Cleveland was out, McKinley was in, and they would just push through a joint resolution of Congress, which is not the same thing as a law. A resolution is not the same thing as a law. So they pushed through this Newlands Reservation, as they called it, and using a simple majority of both the House and the Senate, they claimed illegally, through an illegal process, the territory of Hawaii. And they would make it and declare it a U.S. territory until 1959, when they would upgrade that to statehood. So for 125 years, Hawaii was illegally occupied. 125 years ago is when they overthrew the kingdom, the throne, the crown, the queen. And the queen would be actively seeking resolution to that for many years, and actually until her death. But it would never come. Even when there was a president in Grover Cleveland who worked to try to restore the crown, the hawks in Congress at the time, people think a lot of the stuff that we see in U.S. politics is all new, but no, there were divisions between the Senate and the House and the presidency and the Supreme Court. So they used an illegal process to claim Hawaii. And the thing is, they were so effective at beating down the Hawaiian people and doing it in a way that they would actually convince not only the Hawaiian people but the world over, oh yeah, the Hawaiians, they wanted to be annexed. And the fact is they didn't. I mean, and if the Queen was successful in getting most of the population, the Hawaiian population, to actually sign a petition. They call them the Kue petitions. And there were two sets of them. One was they both rejected the annexation treaty, but one of them was more specific about their devotion and their support for the Hawaiian kingdom, the crown, the queen, and the like. But over, at the time, what would be the bulk of the population of the native population of Hawaii, and over 40,000, I think close to 50,000 signatures, made it clear that the Hawaiian people were not supporting annexation. But, generations would pass and people would not be aware of it. But when the sovereignty movement was really starting to take hold in our territories, and that includes some of the AIM stuff, but a lot of the work towards native sovereignty that was happening in the 70s and coming out of the essentially the civil rights era, Hawaiians became more aware of what the circumstance was, and they learned that no, there wasn't an annexation, even though they got a big statue of William McKinley in front of McKinley High School in Hawaii with a scroll of paper that says annexation treaty on it. That never even happened. That's not real. McKinley never had an annexation treaty in his hands. The only person who ever saw one was Cleveland, who rejected it. So, but for generations, there was a certain level of submission that was almost accepted about this, and but generations that would come would stand up. So, 25 years ago, when Bill Clinton was in office, and so this would be 1993, there was enough pushback, and had been so for a couple of decades, that the United States, again during the Clinton administration, would pass another joint resolution of Congress. This one in 1993 would be what is considered the apology resolution, and that apology resolution basically acknowledged the wrongdoing of the United States, and unlike the resolution that illegally took Hawaii, that was barely passed with a majority, this resolution was overwhelmingly passed. So this resolution, which acknowledged wrongdoing by the United States, apologized for it, but did nothing to really change it. There was some language in that would set the stage for certain benefits or programs to be established in Hawaii to somehow address the issue, but it never addressed land claims issues, land rights issues, and the like, and it didn't acknowledge the Hawaiian people as a distinct people, even really. And when the Hawaiians tried to use, this is one of the ironies, and that's why I'm going here, when the Hawaiian people would use that joint resolution of Congress, the apology resolution from 1993, as some sort of basis to fight land issues and some of the other issues that they were trying to advance to advance them as a people, the Supreme Court ruled and said, no, a joint resolution of Congress has no force of law. So the 1993 resolution would have no force of law, yet the 1893 resolution, which illegally overthrew essentially officially overthrew the Kingdom of Hawaii, and would be a part of, again, a continuation of that illegal occupation, did seem to have force of law. So, but coming out of that Clinton era, there began a series, again, for 25 years, the people of Hawaii have really, in a big way, resisted. And again, as a part of this anniversary, one of the things, and I know there's a long way to get to where I'm going here, but one of the things that was leading up to this 125th anniversary was a bit of a campaign, which is the I Am Not American campaign. And it didn't just start this year. I have been hearing Hawaiians, for over a decade, assert strongly that they are not Americans, that they are Hawaiians. They are Kanaka Maoli. That's the word, like our word, ongwe ongwe, the Kanaka Maoli. And so what was happening in these marches that took place last week, there were many people, and I've posted a picture of some of the young people carrying signs that said, "We are not Americans." And of course, what that does to me is, for one thing, it encourages me and it makes me, proud to have any association with some of these folks in Hawaii for taking such a strong stance. But on the other side, it makes me feel bad because I look at our territories, and I'm not just picking on the BIA tribes, and I don't use that word loosely, but I'm not just talking about the BIA or the DIA on the Canadian side, the INAC tribes. I mean, even some of the Haudenosaunee territories. I traveled to Akwesasne this past weekend. And just as what I'll see here, which is plenty of American flags flying on the front yards of Native people here in Seneca territory, including in front of the Seneca buildings and the roundabout down at the other end of town, in front of their their library, in front of their fire hall, in front of residences. Plenty of American flags. Not so many Seneca flags, but plenty of American flags. And when I went up to Akwesasne, I saw American flags and Canadian flags. I would see more symbols of the colonizing presence on our territories than the symbols of our autonomy and distinction. And and I had a debate, a Facebook debate, just a little over a week ago. One of my friends, Ben Carnes, had reposted something that I had put up about, and I don't remember which post he had reposted, but I put a series of posts up that were talking about things like in fact, one of them was a Star Wars post, and it said, okay, we're all in agreement. We're going to join the Empire and try to change it from the inside. And then it said no rebel ever. And so that was the post. And as a result of that, there was some debate about it. Of course, most people see a post like that, or they see a post like says, I'm not American. And most Native people will like the post. But then you're going to find a lot of people will like it. I mean, click on like, but not necessarily fully embrace that idea. But then you're going to come across some people, not just non-Native, but Native people who reject the notion that a Native person would not accept U.S. or Canadian citizenship, and almost be somewhat offended by an assertion that I'm not American. And that was where I had this debate. And the folk the guy that I was arguing with or debating on Facebook was Native from Oklahoma, and he just could not accept that the position that I was taking, that I wasn't American. He was, oh yeah, you are. I said, no, I'm not. He goes, well, did you renounce your citizenship? And I said, no, I didn't renounce my citizenship. Why would I use a U.S. process, or some official, constitutional process to renounce my citizenship if my position is they never had the authority to claim, to declare me a citizen in the first place? I mean, it's like acknowledging their authority to reject their authority. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. But again, we had this debate. But again, as I look through our territories, and I go through, and I see many of our territories, it was very evident in Standing Rock, the headquarters at for the Standing Rock Sioux. I think they had like 8 flags in a circle in front of their headquarters. Before Standing Rock became this battleground for the Dakota Access Pipeline, Obama went out to Standing Rock and actually went up to Cannonball for a Flag Day celebration. There were more red, white, and blue American flags. There were more flags flying in Standing Rock than in Iowa on the 4th of July. I mean, it was incredible. So as I see these Hawaiians, and I've posted a couple of pictures. I posted something a day or two ago. Another picture of a group of them holding their signs. I am not American. And I think part of the thing that is, as much as I'm encouraged to see the Kanaka Maoli do that, it is really difficult to get Native people to embrace this. I mean Native people on the continent. Ongwe. I mean, Haudenosaunee even. Look, I know that through this whole process of colonization, there's been a lot of indoctrination. That's why we enlist in their armed forces in such large numbers. That's why Christianity and so many churches exist on our territories. That's why that's why many of our governments, our traditional governments were rejected, and either IRA, which is Indian Reorganization Act governments, or other types of constitutional governments that looked and felt like American governments, stylized after some of their system, has made its way onto our territories. And that's why, even in Seneca Nation, they have a president and an executive branch. They have a president and a treasurer. They don't have, it isn't a system. It's not like the traditional system with clans, where clans, elevate or designate a representative from the clans, and that would be ultimately mischaracterized as a chief, I guess. But what we know as chiefs and clan mothers are not necessarily a system here in Seneca territory. And I would argue that many of the so-called traditional systems have been bastardized and they have been compromised by, church influences. And I'm not saying that to be pejorative. I mean, even the Seneca Nation's Constitution, which is not traditional, was influenced and it was they had help crafting it from Quakers. And of course, we see the influence not only of churches, I mean, in traditional government, but we also see the influences of the outside. Even if you only look at it from how somebody proves they are the legitimate leadership. Sometimes this is something that the Bureau of Indian Affairs sorts out. That's what's been going on in Cayuga territory. It's like the Cayugas couldn't sort it out themselves. They had to leave the final decision up to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It happened in Oneida. It's happened in other territories. And Onondaga, the bastion of the Haudenosaunee, right? Everybody calls it the capital, which it's not. But they have participated in both situations, situation with Oneida and Cayuga, in playing that game with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we've lost our way, and we've lost that sense of identity. I mean, I will hear some people, say, "Well, I'm not an American," but those are the exceptions to the rules. And then even when you hear some people say it, you realize that it's kind of shallow. Or you'll hear people say, "Well, I'm not American. I'm Mohawk, or I'm Seneca, or but I'm an American too." I mean, I've heard some Native people claim that they have dual citizenship. Sometimes they characterize that dual citizenship as being Canadian and American because they are Native, or they'll say, "I've got essentially three identities: one as a Native person, one as a Canadian one." And look, all that stuff is wrong. If you've been assimilated into the Canadian system or the American system, it is what it is. Now, this is that challenge that we have with identity. And now, look, and as much as the Hawaiians have made me proud with a lot of their push for sovereignty and the restoration of the Hawaiian kingdom, and I'm tremendously proud. They too have face many conflicts in terms of their identity. Even as they're declaring they're not Americans, there are some among them who, in fact, I was just having a debate with a friend of mine from Hawaii, saying, "Well, I know it's wrong and the system's rigged and that kind of stuff, but I still vote." And of course, my position on voting is not just that if we vote in their system that we are in their system. And I take it a step farther. If you look at what's involved with registering for a vote, what you're saying is where you live is U.S. territory. You are actually listing what district they're claiming, what congressional district or state district or whatever else legislative district you're in. So you're attesting. And if you live on a Native territory, I mean, if you're a displaced Native person, so if you're living in Vegas or New York City or Chicago or whatever else, maybe it's not quite as bad. But if you live on a Native territory, if you live on the Cattaraugus territory and you register to vote, saying that your residence, where you live, your address is in Erie County, in such and such legislative district, in such and such congressional district, you are essentially giving them exactly what they want to claim, that our land is theirs. So this is all part of that conflict. But and again, the Hawaiians are struggling with this stuff too. And the church has a lot to do with it. I'll say that there are a lot of Native people who are very religious. We have a lot of churches on our territories, everything from the Mormon churches to Seventh-day Adventists and to and part of that came out of the residential school era. And Hawaiians went through that same thing too. I mean, it was made very clear when the U.S. first took over Hawaii was they had to bury their history. I mean, they kept enough of it to keep it, fun for them, keep the hula dancing and we'll strap some coconut bras on the pretty girls and that kind of stuff. So we could still have that island paradise feel. But the amount of their culture that was obliterated through the churches and through the educational systems is the same thing we experienced. What's kind of amazing, and when I look at the Hawaiian history, because this history of occupation is barely over a century old. I mean, we've been, as Native people here on Turtle Island, especially in the east here, Haudenosaunee territory, we've been battling our identity and our autonomy and battling with the colonizing influences for hundreds of years. I mean, it's been, it was the 1600s that our people started experiencing, European immigrants washing up on our shores. 1492, if you want to, count the Caribbean. So we've been at this for a long time, but in a very short period of time, the United States was successful at burying a certain amount of information, and then the Hawaiian people were incredibly active at bringing all that information back to light. So in a much shorter time span, they were both stomped on and reinvigorated in the same time. Now, the Hawaiians have a huge battle in front of them, and the thing is, as big as the fight is, they are right, and almost nobody can claim that they aren't. I mean, it's almost impossible to look at the history of the United States, and that's why they have this apology resolution. And and the rest of the world failed Hawaii too. Hawaii had something like 90, almost 100 treaties with other countries. They had over 60 embassies in other nations. And those nations failed Hawaii badly. And they looked the other way while the United States stretched its legs in its imperial, in its own colonization beyond the continent itself, beyond what we experience as Native people here. But I come back to this strong group of Hawaiian people who are willing to stand up and march and demonstrate and protect their mountain, Mauna Kea, and reject this idea of federal recognition through the Interior Department and hold signs up and say, I am not American. And I wonder when we're going to do the same. And I wonder when, and not just when do we do it as individuals, but when does the leadership in our territories do it? When are they finally prepared to pull that American flag down? I mean, it should have happened long ago. But with this administration, with the Trump administration, with Donald Trump as the president, if there was ever a time to say, look, our relationship is strained and I'm not going to fly your flag on our territories until we are equals. At very least say that. Because I don't know what it means to see an American flag flying in front of an administration building for a First Nation, for one of our sovereign nations. I mean, especially if we're claiming to be sovereign nations. I don't even know what that means when I see the American flag flying there. Is it friends and allies? Or is it submission? And if it's friends and allies, then why do we have the relationship that we have? Why is it that this president and the governor of the state and so many others of both parties can say the things that they say and do the things that they do, and us not react to it? I mean, I don't think it's disrespectful to take their flag down, fold it up in one of those little triangle boxes and stick it in a closet and tell the president of the United States or, the local congressman or senator and say, look, you guys aren't doing this right. And we're not going to fly your flag on our territories while we are feeling this oppression from the federal government. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to do. I also don't think it's an unreasonable thing to do to have a campaign that the elected or selected or traditionally selected representatives in our territory stand behind this I am not an American campaign. And they haven't, and they don't, and they won't. And I'm not trying to pick on any the Seneca Nation or the the Standing Rock Sioux specifically, or anybody in particular. But I got to tell you, when I've attended things like NCAI functions, the National Congress of American Indian, or even some other conferences, when I hear the submissiveness that comes to the opening prayer, or when I see the Pledge of Allegiance being done on our territories, and I'm thinking, are we pledging our allegiance to the United States, to that flag? Are we doing that? And why? We oftentimes talk about the trust relationship with the federal government. And I think we're confused about what that is. Because when we think of trust as a virtue, as something that, where a trust is earned and that you have a trusting relationship, that sounds all nice. But when you really consider, when the federal government says things like trust relationship, they're not looking at that. They mean a legal definition. They are the trustee. We are the wards and they are the custodian. That's what they mean by it. That's a hierarchy. That's domination. That's submission. Look, we're about in the hour. We're going to take a break. I'll play another Logan Stats tune. We'll play, we'll do Bright Lights, and we'll go out with that, and we come back. I want to keep going on this a little bit. I just want there to be a thought on what we're, what's being talked about here. So we'll take a break, and we'll be right back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
And she works down in that coffee shop, the busiest street of a murder town. And she knows just what she wants, with a smile with the now long days got her down. If the bright lights stop blinding me, looks like we're in for a ride, yeah. And you can always confide in me, and darling, just hold on tight, yeah. There ain't no turning back, and there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back. Just can't stand the thought of another man, and there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back, and there ain't no running home. Just can't stand the thought of another man. The curtains close, the dust is settled down. Sound much too big for this little town. The tip of my tongue, you can hear my sound. The top of my lungs, you just watch me drown. Oh, if the bright lights stop blinding me, looks like we're in for a ride. You can always confide in me, and I can just hold on tight, yeah. So go ahead, love, and make my heart go off the deep end. I'll be free for the weekend. Pick up the pieces and pretend that it's all okay when it all is said and done. At least we had a good run. I think I jumped the gun. No turning back, and there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back. Just can't stand the thought of another man, and there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back, and there ain't no running home. Just can't stand the thought of another man.
All right. Thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Hey, I want to take this chance to thank my sponsors, Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, my good friends like Ed Schindler, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and the Seneca Nation has made a contribution to the show, and I appreciate that. And I also want to thank many others who have helped the program in the past. We've been at this for, this is our 8th year. And many of those years we were on commercial radio and had to buy that space to do that. And without those who used to advertise and support us in the past, we wouldn't be here today. So so I want to thank those who have only helped us in the past. You helped us get where we are. So I want to thank you for joining in the fight and doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. And I want to thank CKWE, both for their simulcast and the rebroadcast of the show. I also want to thank Real People's Media, Netroots Radio, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying the program. And I want to thank everybody, including my wife, for sharing the show, sharing not only the Facebook live stream, but sharing the YouTube videos of the show. And when we get done with the program, we load the audio up on SoundCloud, and so the audio is available. I know there are some of you who share that as well. So, look, I appreciate it, and that is the way the word gets out, and that is the way we contemplate these things. And look, and I'm not trying to criticize somebody or cast a finger necessarily and say, "Oh, look at you, you're all assimilated and I'm not." No, that's not the reason for the conversation. I just think it's important that people realize that there are people in Hawaii who are taking a stronger position, at least to say, "No, I'm not an American." And there's I saw a video 2 weeks ago, a bunch of people that I know from Hawaii, some people that I've visited here when they've been on the mainland, whole bunch of people all taking saying the same. I'm not an American. They just said that they were a Hawaiian subject, or they were a Hawaiian subject of the Hawaiian Kingdom, or they were saying they were Hawaiian national. But they started out by looking directly into a camera and said, "I am not an American." And now, with this anniversary and this acknowledgement and march, and I don't want to even call it a protest. I want to, really call it what it was, a large gathering of the people in various places in Hawaii. I mean, it's not just where the Iolani Palace is, but there were marches throughout Hawaii, and the idea of seeing pictures, and I want to thank those who post them and have included me in those group pages that allow me to see so much of what is taking place in Hawaii. But to see those photos of people holding those signs up saying, "I am not an American," it's a debate we have here. Unfortunately, there's not enough of us having. I've never seen a large assembly of Native people in any one of our territories standing up and saying, "I'm not an American." Now, look, I go to the Longhouse, and I know the view there. And in fact, it's always been this long, standing tradition that you better be careful if you call a Mohawk a Canadian, or an American, and because we have had a longer history of fighting, these occupiers in our territories. We've had more conflicts, and I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to set us apart from anybody, but there's probably more rejection of that sentiment in the Mohawk territories than in other territories. Now, having said that, like I said, in Kahnawake, they have a Knights of Columbus there. I mean, I don't know what could say, it's one thing to have churches on your territory. It's another thing to have a Knights of Columbus, which is obviously a Catholic organization, but still, or maybe it's not obvious, but it is a Catholic organization. So, and of course, there are, look, every one of our arenas, they hang an American flag and a Canadian flag inside those things. I mean, I think it's great that the local schools here, hoist a Seneca flag, on their flagpole, either with, oftentimes beneath, an American flag, but that's not on our territory. But we give the American flag and their POW flag top billing on our territories. If not top billing, equal billing. And again, I'm not trying to hate on the United States necessarily. And I'm certainly not trying to hate on the people, the American people, the Canadian people, U.S. citizens. I mean, the distinction between us is not necessarily of our making. It's the making of people who came before us. As a Native person, the issue, though, is the failure of the descendants of those colonizers and those people who benefit from that colonization, who fail to recognize that distinction, who don't want to acknowledge that we are a sovereign people or that we're a distinct people. It gets that the whole mascot issue is part of that debate, because it's real easy for somebody to take our image or an image they believe represents us, slap it on a football helmet or a T-shirt, or a cheerleading outfit, and claim that they're honoring us. But it doesn't. I mean, if you're trying to take a symbol of a people who you believe we once were, but at the same time ignore who we are, then that's not honoring us. That's not even really honoring our past. It's honoring your view of what you think our past was, and how that makes you a better competitor by calling yourself a redskin, a warrior, a chief, or a brave, or whatever else. That doesn't even make sense to us, and it certainly isn't something that we deem as a compliment. Especially, I mean, our interaction when our kids compete against a team from a school that has a Native mascot, they experience racism, overt racism from the kids who says Redskins on the front of their uniform. So there's no honoring. And I'll tell you, I went to a school called the Cambridge Indians, and they're still called that. I haven't ever gone back to have the conversation about why that's problematic. But I'll tell you, as a child going to that school, as a teenager going to that school, yeah, I used to get called chief or wapu or worse. And of course, I was the only native kid in the school. So you roll it off and you laugh at it. And oftentimes, the folks who are calling you something are treating it like a term of endearment almost. Like they're, I mean, on one hand, they're acknowledging that I'm distinct, but they aren't necessarily calling me something that would be a compliment for that distinction. And there was no effort in that school to educate anybody. I never learned anything about residential schools in school. In school, I never learned about schools. I never learned about the Dakota 38, the largest mass execution in the history of the United States. I didn't learn about any of the policies, any of the treaties that were broken. In fact, I never learned about a single treaty in school, even though my school was called the Cambridge Indians. You would think, okay, they took the name. Maybe their social studies class would dedicate a day. No, didn't happen. Didn't happen. Indians, when I was in school, Indians was taught as a period of time that came before discovery. And that's it. There were the Indians, then the white people came, and then you go on from there. We had this this memorization device, and it was called and so you recite this thing: idiots do collect rusty nails. That's what that's how you would learn the periods of history, right? Indians, discovery, colonization, revolution. I don't remember what nails stood for, what the end stood for. but I mean, these were the devices that we were taught to remember because you had to recite them, right? You had to remember the periods of American history. And that first period of American history was Indians. And then it was over. That period ended and discovery happened, right? I mean, that's the way it's taught. And the problem is because they have sandwiched us in their history book, in the first page and a half. Where does our identity get reinforced within that dominant system? And that's what the Hawaiians had to face. I mean, generations of Hawaiians were taught that the annexation was legitimate. They saw statues erected with presidents carrying an annexation treaty. they were led to believe that people who came before them wanted to become Americans. And then they found out the truth. And the truth was ugly. And the truth was illegal. And that's our truth. The difference is there is a strong body, and I'm not saying every Native Hawaiian, because look, there's some Native Hawaiians out there. They want to be federally recognized as a tribe, and they're hoping to get BIA funds, and they're hoping to create, some of the same bureaucracies and the same tribal organizations and tribal programs and everything else that exists on Turtle Island here, U.S. and the Canadian side. They want to. They're completely prepared to carve out their identity as a tribe, band, or nation of Indians, even if it's Hawaiians, subordinate to the laws of the United States, as have so many on the U.S. and Canadian side. But I got to tell you, there's still, there's still, 250,000 Hawaiian people living on the island. There's even more than that. I've heard some estimations that if the United States tried to turn the Hawaiian people into a tribe, it would be a federally recognized tribe. It would be the largest one in the United States. It would be, and right now I think the largest one is considered the Navajo at 200,000 or 300,000. But these guys would almost double that. There's some estimations that there may be as many. And of course, you get into this whole thing of proof and identity, and whether you go to blood quantum or whatever, you get into this whole big battle over, well, how do you determine who is and isn't a Native Hawaiian for federal rec purposes? Oh yeah, that'll be a challenge. But there may be 700,000. Certainly, there's over 500,000. But in the islands right now, and this is the debate that some of those guys go through, because they're still a significant population, and that's where getting and this is where the "I am not American" campaign and slogan and movement runs into a little bit of a wall, because there are still Hawaiians who think, we still have pull politically if we vote, not taking fully into consideration what voting in the American system says about you. It says you're an American, right? Only Americans can vote in American elections, right? And of course, like I said, the whole voter registration thing is another issue. But I get it. They still believe they're a large enough voting bloc, and that perhaps, unlike in many of our territories, as a voting bloc, they could sway an election because they could come to some agreement on who or what to vote for. See, that's a problem on our territories, because if you look on most of our territories, you could actually see that our population is almost as split politically in terms of conservatism versus liberalism along the same lines as America. They might be 50-50. And, and of course, military has a way of affecting that. A lot of times you can look at veterans as conservative. And you may look at perhaps some of the folks who are involved in tribal council or education, the more educated ones, I guess. Oftentimes, like in the American culture, the more educated you are, the more likely you are going to be liberal leaning or left leaning. But I don't think you can go into any one of our territories. If you got every Seneca to vote in a state or national election, I think you'd find that it would be very difficult to get them to vote as a bloc on one issue. I think half the people on the Seneca territory were pro-Trump. Yeah, I know that sounds absurd, but I think it's probably true. They may not be so much now, but I think they were. And I could be wrong. But, we don't poll that stuff, and we don't vote in their elections very much. We do at a very low level. It's hard to get voter participation or people participating in their own local politics here on any one of our native territories, whether it's Akwesasne. There's been some elections up there where it was a couple of hundred people that voted. Honestly, and of course, and they're a pretty big population up there in that St. Regis Tribal Council scenario. But so we certainly aren't going to vote in the non-native elections, very strongly. We don't have a big showing there, and of course the reason I say that we don't have a presence in their voting system or have any significance is because, one, we're a small population that doesn't have a large voter participation anyway, but we're also divided. Look in the Seneca territory. Seneca territory here, The Senecas are divided amongst what, if you were to include our territories in the counties that surround them, we would be, have the population split between the Cattaraugus County, Erie County, and a small portion in Chautauqua County. If we believed and accepted their legislative lines and districts, we'd be separated into all kinds of different districts, on the state level and the federal level. So we would never represent even a voting block or a single voting block anyway, because we're already divided. So these are things, and I've talked about a lot of these things before. So I know from perhaps many of you who listen to the show, you're getting the sense that I'm kicking a dead dog, I guess, here, but. Again, what brought this to light were those pictures posted from Hawaii. I'm not an American. And this, I also saw a couple of other posts. There was a post about this Native woman who wants to run for governor of Idaho. And of course, everybody, do you think there should be, that this woman should be the first Native American governor? And I'm one of the only people posting on it saying no. Because if she does have leadership skills, wouldn't it be great if she led Native people instead of the state of Idaho? Which Native people still don't represent the bulk of the population there. I don't know what the ethnic breakdown of Idaho is, but her constituency isn't going to be predominantly Native. And if she is a Native person running for office especially for the governorship, who's she going to have to appeal to? I mean, we can all assume, all Native people are going to support her just because of the color of her skin. And unfortunately, that's probably true. And most people wouldn't even think about what her politics is. I mean, and I'll go back to Diane Humatiwa, who was one of the first Native American woman who was put into a federal judge position. Oh, everybody was so happy. Look at this. We have a fine. I think she was a Navajo woman. Fine Navajo woman who's a federal judge. Isn't that great? Well, what's her politics? The first case that involved Native people that she ruled on, she ruled against the Native interests. She ruled against the Native people who were trying to block a highway that they were, as far as they were concerned, was going to desecrate their land. She ruled against the Native people. So having a Native federal judge didn't do the Native people any good. And you know what? If she had ruled the other way, people would have cried foul. All the white judges ruling against us is okay, but if a Native judge ruled in our favor, you can bet that she'd be scrutinized. And in fact, some would argue, just like Trump argued that Spanish judge, the Hispanic judge, I'm sorry, who was of some Mexican descent, that he should be recused from ruling on a case that involved, that somehow his race could affect or something. So white people can rule over everybody, but let a person of color step up into a position, and immediately the scrutiny comes on to whether they can be impartial or not. But getting back to this woman trying to run for judge or for governor of Idaho, I look at people like that, and again, I go back to the Star Wars meme. All right, so we're all in agreement. We're all going to join the empire and change it from within, said no rebel ever. We don't change it from within. If this woman was successful becoming a governor of Idaho, hey, she might have been a great governor for Idaho, but it doesn't mean that she was going to automatically have great Native policies in that state. And if she did, she'd probably be one-term governor. But I guarantee she's not going to get elected on a Native platform. There are not enough of us. A Native person is not going to run for any, even a state office, running on a pro-sovereignty or a pro-Native platform, because there have been Native politicians. I think there's a couple of senators and there's been a couple of congressmen. Ben Nighthorse Campbell. You got the word Nighthorse in there. But he wasn't pro-Native. Yeah, he'll throw a headdress on and put a shovel in his hand to do a groundbreaking ceremony for a museum in Washington. But he didn't advocate for Native people in any strong, substantive way. In fact, he took a certain resentment in assuming, because he was Native, that he should be involved or forced to be involved in Native issues. That was the position he took. There was actually, and I'll say this again, and I've mentioned it before, so some of you are going to say, oh, he's going to bring that up again. Charles Curtis was a Kaw Native, Vice President of the United States. There was a Native Vice President of the United States. Yes, you may be hearing it here first. And he sucked for Native people. He was terrible for Native people. He was one of the, I think he was from Kansas, or Nebraska. I'm not even sure. I can't remember now, but where he was a congressman and a senator. And during his term as a politician representing, in the U.S. Congress is when territories lost, when people lost their territories in Oklahoma, there was, he was terrible. He was a terrible politician for Native people. And it's not like he, had some affinity towards us. He probably rejected more of that part of his identity. It didn't exist as part of his identity. He was a Republican, and he was a terrible congressman. I mean, there was some sense that because he was in not only in Congress, a congressman, and then ultimately a senator, and finally the vice president, that somehow he was going to be a sympathetic ear to Native causes, and he wasn't. He wasn't. Look him up. Look at his record. So before you say, wouldn't it be great if we had a Native president or a Native governor or a Native judge, maybe it's time to look at what those Native people who have had success in that system, how much they had to leave us behind to get that success and to be successful. And I got to tell you, I won't even stop there. When Barack Obama named Jody Gillette as his senior policy advisor, or even Kim Teehee before her as a senior policy advisor, I'm not convinced that she did any meaningful good for Native people. So it isn't just the elected ones. So I stand with you folks in Hawaii, and I stand with you in proclaiming that I am not an American. And maybe it'll start to rub off on some other folks. That just about does it, folks. So I want to thank you for listening. And I'll be back on Friday. I'll be in New York this week. You can catch my show in New York, which is a talkback show, which I encourage you to call in. It's on Thursday mornings from 10 till noon, and that's on WBAI in New York City. If you happen to be down there, it is 99.5 on the FM dial, or you can go to WBAI.org to stream it. Thanks. We'll see you then. Yahweh.
Market Street, my new suit and my acoustic guitar, counting the cracks in the sidewalk till I reach my favorite bar. Familiar faces, familiar places, familiar graces. Familiar faces, familiar places, familiar graces. What they say, graces. To go walk down Wall Street where the billionaires smoke Cuban cigars, counting the souls in the sidewalk. No one knows who they are. Shattered faces, shattered places, shattered graces. Shattered faces, shattered places, shattered graces. What they say, graces. Whoa, oh, oh. Whoa, oh, oh. Broken